Hey, thank you everybody for joining us today. Welcome to FYI The BaxterStorey Podcast. These are being launched as part of Mental Health Awareness Week because we know how important it is to have a conversation, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. Really excited. We've got Arran Mcdowell, our people director, with us today. He's going to give us a bit of insight into his life and everything that is all people and different generations. So we would usually kind of get the guests to kind of introduce themselves, but actually we're going to use, Arran, your history as the kind of real crux of the first few questions. And some of the things listeners won't know about you is that you had two pivotal life moments early on: a reduced life expectancy, first and foremost, and then secondly, people and HR was never meant to be a destination. Professional football and maybe Etihad Stadium, or was it Old Trafford, that's probably the destination for you. So we're just going to kind of delve into that, because mental health and athletes is a really big thing. You know, the IOC says 45% of athletes post competitive times suffer from anxiety and depression. You know, Dame Kelly Holmes cites the end of her career as a moment where she really lost her identity. And so you stopped your football career due to injury, and just keen to kind of understand, you know, the impact on that, yourself and your mental health.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here. First and foremost, in terms of experience of generations, I don't have experience of all generations. I just want to be clear on that. I'm still of a certain age. I think in terms of the life expectancy piece was very much around. I had asthma from a very, very early age, and I had asthma quite badly, whereby I wasn't expected to live beyond the age of 5. And ultimately I did, thankfully. I got to a point whereby I didn't actually do any sport because I was told I wasn't allowed to go outside. And then at the age of 10, I changed schools. I was a bit naughty and ended up playing football and got selected for the school football team. And then that led on to many other things as well. So definition of football career, very, very short-lived. A great opportunity in terms of just understanding more the pressures around sport. And when I was going for it, I mean, certainly nowhere near the pressure that elite sports people have these days, and even youngsters. I think I'm very proud of that. I've got a son who's going through the football academy at the moment, and every year there's a lot of high pressure in terms of whether he will stay. And what's abundantly clear, the pressure doesn't just come from within the club; it comes from parents as well. And to the point I've seen some children in tears at the end of a football match, during a football match, because of the pressure they've had from their parents, coaching from the sidelines. There's also the pressure as well, which wasn't around when I was younger, in terms of social media, and people seeing the wealth that's associated with sport and many other things, which again just adds so much pressure onto people to think that they need to be the best. And
so there's a bit of a time gap, I suppose, a small time gap, obviously, between yourself and your son. What kind of different support networks have you seen kind of put in place for him to deal with that? Because the whole social media piece is a heavy influence on the mental health of Gen Zs at the moment.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is just around conversation. And I think this will flow into what we'll go on to talk about later on. Is conversation can take place anywhere. Mm-hmm. The conversation that my wife and I have with him as parents, the conversation that the club he has with him too, his school as well, and his friends. And I think some high profile footballers at the moment are really focusing in terms of speaking about mental health. The impact in terms of being involved in a sporting profession that can only last maybe 10, 15 years if they're lucky, and how they can come out of that and be corrupted in a number of ways, financially, but also emotionally. So there is a lot more support. There's still a lot more that needs to be done.
I think there's a whole piece around financial well-being that you talk there as well. You have no money, and then obviously you have all this money, and what do you do with it? And actually, the cost of living crisis has just shown, has given us a full kind of scope view of how, finance can have the biggest impact on your mental well-being.
Absolutely. And I think, again, that's some of the pressures of social media. Social media has many great benefits, but in terms of people understanding what's going on in the world, in terms of bringing to people's attention some of these issues, because people are speaking more freely about it, and I think the more that can be done and encouraged, the better. But in terms of the financial focus, again, it just leads people to seeing that some people can be vulnerable. And I was reading some stuff recently that a footballer is focusing on, is around the vulnerability of people who have all of this wealth and they don't know what to do with it. So they have friends, family members who do take advantage of that.
I agree. I think one of the things we talked about there was just the developing conversation around mental health, the mental wealth, I suppose, as well. And actually, 70% of Gen Zs and millennials, or Gen Z, have said that they, at some point in their life, have suffered with some mental struggles and would say that they've had mental health issues as well. 27% of our workforce by 2025 will be Gen Zs, which has a really different, kind of reflection or kind of impact on the workspace. You've actually, had quite a long career in terms of people development and kind of coaching high-performing senior leadership teams, I suppose. I'm just really keen to understand, when people are at the pinnacle of their career, how you've seen kind of mental health manifest in that space.
I guess probably if I flip it, I think in terms of what makes a great leader is someone who recognises the fact that their teams need time out, and it's how they focused on that and how they've supported that as well. And I think certainly I learned from people who gave me the time, the breathing space to do what I wanted to do in terms of my own career, but also in terms of just recognising the fact that if I said, listen, I'm going to go for a walk for 10, 15 minutes, they understood why. And it's simple things like that. And how I used to explain to people is, I'd much rather you take 10, 20 minutes out than sit there worrying about something for an hour, do a poor piece of work, not be particularly productive, and no one wins from that. Yeah. And I think, I have had experience in terms of some, senior executives, not within this business, I'm pleased to say, but certainly in other businesses throughout my career, who haven't recognised the fact that mental health can have a serious impact in terms of business performance, the impact on other members in the team, impacts in terms of safety as well, because people are coming into work distracted by things that are taking place outside of work that maybe companies can support. Some people who have probably been a little bit self-absorbed in terms of their own development and had the mindset of, well, I've been able to do it, so I can't understand why everyone else can't follow. And recognising the fact that we're not all made from the same mould, we're all individuals. And I think respecting that is key. And that's one of the things that really attracts me to this business, is the fact that I know my boss Ronan is respectful of the fact that if I say I'm going to be leaving a couple of hours early because I want to go and see my son play football or something, I'm not scared to have that conversation with him, because I know he will happily take time out to spend time with his children and his family and not feel ashamed about it.
So quite often there's some interesting kind of research around kind of Gen Zs and not feeling comfortable to have some of those conversations, or to be able to feel open and honest around some of their kind of expectations. How would you say to them, go have that conversation? What's your advice in that arena?
I think it's I think the stats are around about 33% of Gen Zs don't feel comfortable having that conversation. Yeah. If I flip it, 67% do. And it's how we can really understand and share the learnings, the experiences of that 67% of people who do feel comfortable, and what's the difference. And what you often see is absolutely down to management style, and managers who realise that they will get the best from their team by treating their team in the way that they want to be treated. So I think that's absolutely key. I think also, again, it is just sharing best practice. It's just talking about personal experiences. Whether we want to admit it or not, we all go through moments which could be called, mental health, or anxiety or stress or depression. Whether you're preparing for a sales presentation or going in for a difficult conversation with a client, or going in, to a one-to-one meeting where you might be asking for a pay increase or something. And I had a conversation with my wife the other day just about something around changing her working days, and she spent probably 3-4 days talking through it with me, the scenario, what could be the possible outcome. And I will say to her quite frequently, it's wasted energy, because until you have that conversation, you don't know what the outcome's going to be. It's going to either be a yes, a no, or I'll go away and think about it.
And what's the worst that can happen with all of those outcomes?
Absolutely. As long as you feel prepared for it, and I think preparation's a big piece of it. I think preparation isn't just necessarily about having it written down in terms of what you want to say, how you want to approach things. One of the things I've greatly benefited during my previous career with an organisation was something I initially went into thinking, God, I don't get this stuff. And it was a mindfulness session. And having a day of mindfulness, all I walked away with was actually the importance of controlling your breathing. And I've used it a number of times prior to going into meetings with clients or colleagues. Prior to this meeting itself. Just the importance of taking maybe 5 minutes and just focusing on my breathing, and then actually how much confidence that's given me. So just simple little things like that. I mean, everyone knows what they feel comfortable with. And I guess probably the final point on that is, if you're not too sure, talk to someone. Just ask someone. I've got no issue if someone wants to pick up the phone to me and say, how do I approach this situation? And I'm sure, I know we've got many colleagues, certainly within our business, who will be more than happy to help people.
I suppose there's a reverse of that as well. If you're a leader or a manager and you're asking for some communication, or you've just sent a diary note because you want to meet with one of your team, but you haven't put any context around that. Mental health awareness week this year is all about anxiety. Yep. I know personally from past moments in my career, the anxiety that kind of set up myself for, kind of walking into a meeting or a situation that I had no idea what I was walking into. And I suppose it's a bit of a call to action, actually. If you are leading a team and you are going to set diaries, give some context at all times, because actually that simple moment of context can change somebody else's kind of interpretation and therefore have a huge impact on their potential mental well-being around that session.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if it's as you say, with a meeting request, if it's an interview, I've got some interviews coming up in the next couple of weeks, and what I wanted to make sure was that when I was inviting those people to an interview, they knew exactly what we were going to cover, so that when they come in, that there will be no surprises. They know what the agenda is, I know what the agenda is. And I've put in there quite clearly what my expectation from the meeting is. And maybe I should have asked, actually, what's your expectation? Maybe that's something I can go back and do.
It's really interesting. I think there was some stuff that came out from LinkedIn a few years ago, how recruitment used to be a one-way process. I've got a job that I need to fill and therefore it's all on my terms, and my terms don't exist anymore. It used to be, I think it was sort of 70% company, 30% sort of potential team member, and then you kind of meet in the middle, and then if there was a third stage, it was for that team member to choose you. It's now 50-50 day one. And that kind of whole anxiety of people coming into an interview, is quite a stressful space, I suppose. And how have you changed? So that's one way that you changed your kind of interview approach, I suppose, allowing people to understand expectation. But when you're in that moment and you can see that somebody might be struggling, what have you done to try and help them?
I think if you can identify that someone's struggling, I think what I have done is I've just said, listen, I've recognised it in the here and now, because again, I can remember a senior manager who was going for a development program, and he was going through a series of interviews. Actually, he turned up. He wasn't very well. He had the flu, but he wanted to force himself through it because he thought this was the only day we could do it. There's an expectation on me. And I sat down with him, I saw him, and I said, "You're not well enough to do this." I said, "Just go home." I said, "Because we're not going to get the best out of you. You're going to go away thinking, do you know what, I've completely failed here. And we can rearrange it. Nothing's that important that we can't reschedule it and have you here performing your best and feeling comfortable to do that." And he came back a couple of weeks later and actually stormed it. So it's just things like that. I think again, it's just a recognition piece. I'll repeat myself: treating people how you want to be treated yourself.
I think kindness is everything at the end of the day, and we're an industry of hospitality, so if you can't go to an interview occasion and feel like you're in a hospitable environment, it's probably not quite right either. And I just want to go back to probably a bit of the earlier conversation, something you said about making space, and actually one of your own team, Lindsay, who's our new head of ED&I at BaxterStorey, made a really great statement that I think a part of her onboarding process and also her interview process, she'd made a clear statement to you that if you want her to think, well, that's not her sat at a laptop, that's her walking her dogs in the field, that's where she creates that. And you talk about, people feeling empowered to kind of take that space, I suppose. In a business where sometimes permission is felt to need to be granted, how do you feel people can deal with those tensions sometimes of kind of do I, don't I? And, how do you say to somebody, just go do it, because you will feel so much better at the end of it?
Yeah, I think sometimes, permissions are written and unwritten.
Yeah.
And sometimes the unwritten ones are usually people's perception of what can I do and what can't I do. So if you're not sure, one, ask. Or two, as I sometimes like to do, I just try it and wait and see whether anyone tells me
ask for
I'm
forgiveness,
doing the
not
wrong
for
thing.
permission.
Absolutely. And I think that's a way of doing it. I mean, if I would always encourage people to challenge the norm. And yes, there'll be times when it's difficult to do so. You need to be able to read a room, and also we have to recognise within our business. I'm very privileged. You are as well. You're in a role where you have quite a lot of autonomy. You're not tied to a location, and when we focus on our team members at locations, they have a service to provide. So actually taking that time out might not necessarily be that easy. But what we do have is we have teams within our locations. And if we can get our teams to recognise some of these things, and we need to do a lot around communication, around training, the empowerment piece. I think the more we do on that, the more we get, not just, it's not just the role of a leader or a manager, it's the role of everyone within the team to recognise and support. And we did a back to the floor day, a month or so ago, and
I hear you were excellent on the tills.
I was excellent on the tills, absolutely excellent. It cost me a fortune, but I was taking out the rubbish with a lovely lady who worked in the location, but she wouldn't. She didn't want me to do it, and I had to tell her to sit down and watch. I'm more than capable, and I just wanted to give her a bit of breathing space. Just sit down and talk to me and tell me about herself, whilst I was doing all the hard work. And I think as teams, we can certainly do a lot more of that to support each other.
I think what I hear from that is that one size doesn't fit all, and actually you really need to consider your business and consider everybody, because you don't know as well anybody's stories, you don't know what's going on, so you need to make sure that you make space for everybody, and that might be very different in different ways, I suppose, as
Absolutely.
Well. Another thing you kind of talked about was kind of senior leadership and kind of not doing great, and there's the great big burnout conversation, and working hard and working all hours used to be a badge of honour, and we all used to and we all are still, some of us, guilty of sort of being in that kind of environment. But we've now got a new generation who say, actually, I read something about millennials being slacktivists, so they will sit in the back of an Uber and tweet that they're not happy with something. But the Gen Z world now will actually stand up and take action and say, I'm not kind of satisfied by that. So much so that they would rather quit a job and go work somewhere else. And 4 in 10 have actually left a job because of mental health issues. That's what they're citing at the moment. What's your kind of thoughts around that whole kind of great big burnout, and how do we also make sure people don't come, kind of trapped like that?
Again, it varies from business to business to industry to industry. I've seen it throughout my career. I've worked in financial services, worked in retail, hospitality, and I have seen the burnouts working in a bank. What I do know is controllable, because something like that can quite easily be avoided with the right attention, care, and again, broken record conversation around it. I think as an organisation in terms of burnout, we're probably certainly with BaxterStorey in terms of we know we have quite structured working patterns and Monday to Friday, so that's helpful. But what I'd also always say, and I can remember an old colleague saying to me, stay and be happy, or go and be happy. And if you get to the point whereby you're just not happy, then yes, there are other opportunities in other businesses. But I'd always encourage people to have the conversation first of all. You might not get the answer you're looking for. You might not get the support you're looking for. But then that tells you actually it's not the right business to work for.
No, it's really, there's a few things in that are really interesting, as generations go, early generations, so boomers and Gen X kind of would traditionally just stick it and stay, and it kind of had, that kind of, deal with it and kind of it'll all be fine mentality, whereas I think younger people are slightly more kind of agile, I suppose. But that's also come around the availability and capability to apply and get a job. We all sit on LinkedIn every day and upload 10 jobs that are available. Whereas traditionally, you go back a couple of decades, that wasn't the case. To go get a new job was a whole different experience. So actually that kind of whole kind of movability is just kind of really changed the game in that respect.
Oh, it has. And it's become less personable. That's for sure. And in my past role, certainly coming out of the COVID period, speaking to colleagues in America, there were some people there who had left the business because of restructuring, or they just decided actually I don't want to stay. I want to find something else that I'm going to get more enjoyment out of. But for those that didn't necessarily have a job to go straight into, they were sending hundreds of CVs, or to be American, resumes a month, and just not getting any response. And that has an impact in terms of mental health, your own feeling of self-worth.
Yeah,
so
imposter syndrome as to whether I should be actually doing this and applying for those roles.
Absolutely. And so again, as an organisation, and many organisations do it, but I think some of the processes we're putting in place to make sure that even if you haven't started with us, you're getting that interaction, you're getting an answer at the end of the day. And I say it might not be the answer you want, but at least it's an answer, and it gives you transparency, and then you can go and make a choice.
There's we've probably got a couple of words and buzzwords that came out, well, not buzzwords actually, were statements, imposter syndrome. Go back 10 years ago and you probably never would have heard that statement being made as well. But there is this piece about it is something that's manifesting in workspace, and that can have a huge anxiety implication on an individual, and also sometimes as to how that manifests make an impact on the team as well. Advice, I suppose, for people that are going through that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, imposter syndrome is something that I probably personally struggled to relate with, because I haven't felt it. Yeah. So I can only go by and what I read in terms of people's experiences of it. And it's it's not just necessarily in the working environment as well. It's outside of that. Again, it's probably another one of those things that we just need to educate people that. It's there. Some people will go for it. Not everyone will. I don't have the answers as to how we can truly tackle it. But certainly, as we start to see these sort of things coming through, we can do more as an organisation to try and identify what the cause is, and what the cause is that maybe the business is contributing to. And how we can try and eradicate it.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced it, stepping into a new role, from a comfort zone, I suppose, of sales into what we're doing now. And with us making some big changes in the business, sometimes you go, gosh, is this the right thing? And it's really interesting. But I think in that, it's the ability to have a vulnerable conversation. And I think vulnerable conversations, like you say, as a business, you don't know sometimes until something's said. And I suppose one thing that I've definitely been considerate with my team is making sure that I have shown them some vulnerability, because I want them to know that they can come back to me and be equally vulnerable. And it is a two-way street at the end of the day. And, you know, we weren't going to talk about it, but, you know, we live in a very hyper-masculine world. And actually we were all taught as, you know, female leaders who were going up through the kind of the ranks, so to speak, that we needed to man up. And, you know, that came with some traits as to kind of, you know, quite straight, less empathy. And I listened to an amazing podcast with Stephen Bartlett and a chap called Mo Gow, who's a happiness expert. And at the end of the podcast, they asked him what's his biggest regret, I suppose. He's been through a lot. He lost his son, which he credits to a lot of the work that he's doing at the moment. But the thing he said that he regrets the most is not embracing his feminine side. He said that in the world that we live in, empathy is so important. And actually, empathetic leadership is what will change everything, because actually, you know, the genders are, you know, masculine and feminine aren't genders, they're characteristics and traits. And actually, as a world, we should be leaning on those feminine traits a bit more, because it's all about creativity and understanding and care. Yeah. And so in a world whereby, you know, we still kind of have this imbalance, I suppose, that does have an impact on mental health and the female-male relationship. What are your thoughts on that? That's a big question.
It's a big question. Well, I think it's, you know, the point you made there is, you know, he was touching on his feminine side. Well, yeah. Actually, yeah, that's the bias there, that actually you only have to be female to, you know, to be sensitive to those sort of things. And you know, I think in terms of my job, you know, I have tough days where I have to make some tough decisions. But yeah, I think I'm also in a privileged position where I've got the opportunity to go and influence, and hopefully, you know, I want everyone to be at work, be happy. I genuinely do. You know, whether that's touching on the feminine side or just being a human being. You know, a few years ago, obviously, we take Caroline Flack and the whole campaign of it, be around, you know, be kind. It's like, okay, that's a campaign people still talk about. You know, people are very much, you know, aware of those, you know, those circumstances, but, you know, people stop being kind probably a day later. And yeah, I can't sit here and say, you know, I'm the nicest person all the time. You know, call my wife, she'd tell you that frequently. But I certainly, you know, do want to come in and just make a difference in terms of where I can impact. And that's not, you know, focus on my feminine side, my masculine side or anything. That's just about wanting to be a decent human being and using privilege to be able to influence. You know, and I don't just want to influence our current, you know, workforce. I want to influence our workforce in the next 5 years, next 10 years, next 15 years. And then, as you have me positioned, Natalie, I probably will be retired by now.
That's you as a Gen X, eh? So it's been a really interesting conversation, and this isn't about being experts in any field, but it's about having an open, honest, vulnerable conversation, I suppose. What, you know, if you were to give some advice to leaders within the business, and that can be a manager of a team of two or others, you know, mental health being an important topic now, and the fact that we need to recognise it, you know, what should they be looking out for? What should they be considering?
The main thing to look out for is it could happen to you, to me, to them, to their children, yeah, their friends, their family members. So no one's immune to it, and I think that's really important. I think in terms of recognising the ability to support can create high performing teams, successful teams. You know, you don't need to be at the top of your game. You just need to be able to come in and be confident and happy in terms of what you're doing. You know, again, if you're running a 2-person, you know, location through to a location with 200, or you're the chief executive of a 600 million turnover business, you know, you're not immune. And I think that's why, you know, for me, when I'm personally choosing which company I want to go and work with, that's really important to me, is recognising in terms of, you know, the leadership, that they're in tune with that. So I think, anyone can control it, can control this in terms of how they react. And I think there's some very, very simple things. That's just about, listening to the team, being aware and being available.
I think you make a really good point, and there's so much about control, and whether you're in that kind of moment of having some mental health experience, you might not believe that you are able to change it, but you are the person that can get you out of something. I think I remember sort of reading something where someone says, look, can you change it? Can you deal with it, or can you throw it away? And it's that kind of mindset of, actually, what can I do in this circumstance? And to your piece earlier, what is the worst that can happen? There has to be that kind of consideration sometimes, and that's not to trivialize or make it easy or anything, but sometimes it's just taking a step back is a way of kind of helping yourself.
Unfortunately, in my career, I've seen what the worst that can happen. I've sat in hearings with family members, seeing what the consequence of not helping and not supporting. And I think, again, that's why some of the positive things I see within this business, the focus in terms of some of the employee resource groups, in terms of the mental health first aiders, it's great because we've got people who are really, really passionate about supporting people. But again, what's helped lead that is senior management recognising that, regional managing directors, operations directors, giving those people the time to go out and support. So I think that's really, really powerful as an organisation.
So that's been really interesting, and thank you for kind of having such an open and honest conversation. I suppose to wrap this up today, you're a senior leader, with a people focus. What would you say to other leaders that might be a manager of one person, 50 people, 100 people? How should they be considering mental health within their workplace and their team?
I think, again, regardless of whether you're running a large location, you're running a £600 million business, no one is immune to potentially mental health issues. Whether it's anxiety, depression, or potentially people around them being impacted. So I think the opportunity to support is probably just take a step back and realise I'm not immune, and actually some of the actions that I potentially do can have an impact on others, and not necessarily a positive impact. But in the main, by having a positive impact, you can have high performing teams, you have successful teams, you have happy teams, and that's hopefully what everyone wants when they come to work. I mean, I can't remember the last time. Luckily I got out of bed and thought I don't want to go into work today, and I don't want people in our business feeling like that. And certainly as a leader or a manager, or you shouldn't want that either, because we spend a lot of time with people at work, and and our clients and our customers. So we need to have fun. I think having seen the consequences of people with mental health issues that weren't necessarily supported externally, and that's being in rooms, having to go through the aftermath of it and sat with parents and relatives and children, and knowing as a business we actually did everything. Wasn't a tick in a box exercise. It was because I was very passionate that we did have those processes in place, and that was with another organisation. But certainly coming here and seeing that we've got the support available, we've got mental health first aiders, we've got employee resource committees, we've got employee assistance program. I'm here. We've got managers. Pick up the phone, just talk, and I guess probably the other key learning is for leaders and for managers, or anyone who has someone go and talk to them about mental health. You're not supposed to know all the answers. So that's where there is support available. So please use it.
I think that's a really important part. You may be helping somebody with their mental health, but that potentially the impact on yourself as well. So making sure you take the time to kind of get the support and advice that you need to. And if you feel that it goes beyond your kind of capability, there are experts that are sort of trained to do that. And there's incredible employee and team member kind of support resources to do that as well.
But also, as you realise with your own anxiety for today, Natalie,
I know what's coming.
there's things that are out of your control. And apologies to anyone who can hear some metal banging in the background. We're in a fantastic location, but outside there is some building work, and it's out of your control. It's out of my control unless we go and have a word with the builders. But I don't think anyone's going to be particularly impacted by it.
I'll leave that one to you, Arran. I think I did read something once about, can you deal with it? Can you change it? Or can you just throw it away? And I think this is one we're just going to throw it away as well. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on to FYI. We are in the infancy of doing these podcasts, but it's been a really great conversation and we're really grateful for the time. So thanks so much.